Okay, we will adapt. The meeting of the Blueberry Fields Cooperative will now come to order. It is now 6:04. It is July 11th of 2024. I'd like to start off with a guy with a fuzzy head. I'd like to start off by welcoming I'd like to start off by welcoming everyone, residents, members, some or both, board members, Nora. Pat is not with us tonight, so bear with us as we try and keep things organized. We have some guests here. I see Poppy Arford. Sure. Guest. We do have a gentleman here by the name of John Kenny. John is with us from Du Bois and King, and we will be hearing from him later on this evening. So, we are back after a week's vacation, no meeting last week, and trust me when I tell you there was lots going on behind the scenes. A couple of housekeeping items, exits. Where you came in over here, there's another one in the back. The bathrooms are also out through the back. If you would, please silence your mobile devices. And if you could, you see we struggled to get a good recording. And I just want to give a huge thanks to Chris. Chris is a member of our board. This is Chris Wilkins, and he donates not only his time, but his equipment for these in-person meetings. So huge thank you to Chris. So on that note, as far as getting a good recording, if you could, when you want to speak, please raise your hand. We will get one of these really cool high-tech, like Hi-Spy speakers to you so that you can speak. And please speak only with the mic. If you try shouting out, it's not going to come good through the recording. So, on that note, I'd like to introduce Miranda Chung. She is our wonderful secretary, and she will take care of the meeting minutes.
Hi, everyone. It is echoey from where I stand, but can you hear me okay? Great. I previously shared the minutes. It's hard for you. If you sit on one side, it might be easier, maybe. I previously shared the minutes from June 27th to the board via email. I received a few typos and minor edits from Janet, which I've incorporated into the minutes. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
Second. All in favor?
Chris P., do you have a vote? To approve the minutes from June 27th. Sounds good. Thank you. All right. Approved. I will pass it over to Zach for a treasurer's report.
All right. Can everyone hear me? So, as of now, we have $110 collected and 122 people signed memberships. 122.
Zach, do you want to make mention that you're still working on that list and ask folks?
Yeah, if anyone here hasn't paid their dollar, if you could come see me at this meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
I just want to note also, we had some folks that paid $1 but didn't fill out a membership form. So you might want to double check with Zach on that as well.
And I'll follow up with you via email or phone to see what's up with that.
Okay, we're now ready for our special guest, John Kenny. Oh, I'm sorry, we jumped ahead. I jumped ahead.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Report's approved.
And Janet, do you mind if I do some stage setting for John
Oh,
before
sure,
he gets
go right
started?
ahead.
And then I'll get you this thing. Is the audio okay? I feel like I'm always too loud. Is it okay? So just, this sounds so loud. For some context,
Thank you.
so John's joining us tonight from an engineering company, Du Bois and King. He's gonna kind of explain the work that he's gonna do for your community. We talked about his proposal 2 weeks ago on June 27th. He's gonna focus with his company on the water and wastewater systems in the park. The number one thing that people have identified is septics. I know the septic is the big concern. What's the needed work there? Is it more cost effective to hook up to the town? What's the plan, basically? This is the guy who is gonna answer those questions for you. So he's gonna explain maybe about Du Bois, about what the process will be like, and what the final report that you'll get. And I'll talk maybe right after about how we'll integrate that into this purchase process, into this question about whether you're gonna end up purchasing your community and you wanna do that. Does that sound good? And can I just, do you wanna just, oh, you
I have
got
this
one.
one here. Yeah, thanks, Nora. Well, like Nora said, I'm John Kenny from Du Bois and King. We've been contracted to do a property conditions report.
Can everyone hear him?
Can everybody?
I think you have to talk a little
Okay,
bit more.
is that
into-
better? Okay, I have to be a little closer. We've been contracted to do a property conditions report focused on the water and wastewater systems in the park, and I can just go through what we, as far as what we're looking at is, as part of that report, we're starting off a kickoff meeting, which is today, to try to get any kind of feedback from you all. And it's just part of that. So I understand from Nora that you're, as Nora just mentioned, that you're mostly concerned about the wastewater systems. So we'll be looking at that. We're planning on doing field work coming right up. Let me just jump into the schedule quickly. Just lost it. Okay, the field work the week of July 29th. And what we'll be doing is taking a few days and coming around and looking at all the water systems and all the septic systems and mapping them out, popping covers, and trying to get a good idea of what the conditions are that we can see visually around the park. And so you'll see us wandering around in a couple weeks. We'll put a draft report after that, looking at gathering all the information. Nora sent quite a bit of the information that you have available, and we'll be taking all that and boiling that down into a report, looking at conditions, any kind of any kind of recommendations for improvements, and just kind of pulling that all in one report. After we pull that report together and base mapping of everything, we'll come back and present that report to you all for your feedback on what we've come up with. And then after that, we'll finalize the report. And it's quite a quick schedule here. So we'll be here the week of July 29th to do the field work, and we plan to have the draft report put together by August 9th, and then planning a community meeting the week of August 12th, and then finalizing the report on August 19th. So we'll be working on this right away and getting this information back to you and talking to you. I understand from Chris, he's been collecting some surveys. We'll look at all your survey responses, and any additional responses would be good. I understand you have about 50% response.
102 out of 275.
Okay, a little less than that. So any more, the more the...
Tomorrow's the cutoff date. Anyone who hasn't put it in, or you know somebody. Tomorrow's the cutoff date to get your surveys in.
So that's very important information, any kind of issues that you have, and then that'll be part of our report as well.
Chris, what's your address? Where are you putting the surveys?
98 Scarponi Drive, and I have a gray, recycling bin with a cover on it right outside my door, right at the bottom of the stairs, so you can just drop it in there. It's got a cover on it so that the rain won't get to it. I imagine it's going to be some stragglers might come in this weekend or even Monday or something. So, yeah, just bring them over. Even if you're late, I'll add them to the pile right up to the point where I have to turn them over to the engineer. That make sense?
So at this point, I think, if there's anything more specific in what you're looking for in the report, it would be good to hear back from you with specific issues with the water system in particular. I understand about the wastewater systems that we'll be dealing with.
Looks like we got Melissa here.
Chris, did you ever walk around when there was the heavy rain to see if there was any standing water areas?
Oh, yeah.
I drove around slowly twice, once when it wasn't raining, and then I knew I'd have to do it while it is raining because I read some of these surveys that people handed in. Most of them had no complaints. Surprisingly, at a lot of them, they actually said on the survey, no, it's fine, this road, looks great, and a couple people said they have puddles on their street, which freeze in the winter and makes it slippery when they walk. Well, that's a long way from having to repave the park.
So reasonable.
So, and I've checked out people saying they had problems with water or septic system. There weren't that many. I was expecting more. Most of them said, it's fine, or I had a problem years ago and Kit fixed it. I got a lot of that. So that was kind of surprising. There really isn't a lot of complaints where somebody goes, oh, this is terrible, I can't live like this. There was, none of that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to Janet, and then I'll run this right over to you. And I just want to flag that one resident shared a lot of pictures of some pooling water that I'll pass along to John. Emailed it to me, and I'll just get it to you, Chris, and to John.
I just wanted to mention that I just did a quick math on my phone, but we've got 37% of folks that have submitted their survey to you. So I'm just curious if maybe these are folks that have something and don't want to share it. I guess we'll find out when John goes around and does his work. And I just want to ask real quickly, John, is there anything that folks need to do at all when you're here doing your work? Or just stay out of the way?
Well, no, come talk to us, I guess, would be good. If you see us walking around, we'll have vests on, so you'll see that we're from Du Bois and King, and just come and flag us down, because that's the best way to get any information. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you if there's anything that we should reflect in the report.
Yeah, I had a question. This is regarding the water system, the incoming water. It's city water. I think the pipes are the original old iron pipes. And I know I have seen rust come out of the water pipes. And I was just wondering about the condition of those and whether that's something we should have turn over or not.
Yes, that's definitely something we'd want to know about. And we'll, in our mapping,
There definitely is rust that comes out of those old iron pipes. There's no question about that. Rust.
Yeah. So we'll put a base map together with the information that we do have for the age of the pipes and materials of the water mains and service connections.
I tested my water
And,
and there's no lead. I wanted to reassure you of that. I tested my water. There's no lead in it, but it was very alkaline too, and I don't know if that's pertinent or not.
Okay.
Okay.
May I ask, did you submit your survey, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, John, if you do anything underground, like as far as the leach fields.
We'll do some augering, depending on the situation, some hand augers to look at if, depending on the situation, if there's an opportunity to move the leach field or if there's another location for it. But it'll be pretty minimal at this point. Mostly just a visual survey.
The question was, is he going to do anything underground? What's the extent of the underground investigation? Did everyone hear the answer to that? Yeah, okay. And then you've got to,
In your study, are you going to determine the age of the septic systems? Is that possible?
Well, based on the information that we have, we'll summarize that in the report. But we'll pull all the information that we do have and summarize that. But
Are you able to determine, though, the age of the systems?
only based on the information that's provided, or anything at the state level. If there's any kind of state permitting information that says when they were put in, then we'll summarize that in the report too. So you'll have an idea of what we do know, the ages of the different systems.
Okay, and can you determine how many septic systems are shared between two residents? There's quite a bit of that in the complex.
Right, yeah,
You can determine that.
right, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thanks.
Park, the water was backing up into the bathtub. What had happened, there was a tree and the roots had grown into the septic system. So he got in there and he chopped the roots up, but I don't think they replaced the pipe.
Okay.
I'm not sure. And then 2 years ago, I had flooding in the backyard. So when you stepped on the backyard, there was water on top, but you could feel the slushing underneath. So I don't know how deep that was or where it came from or anything.
Okay,
Dig up the whole backyard,
yeah.
so.
Well, that'll be good information. Did you do a survey and put that
Yes,
information
yeah.
in there?
There's a manhole cover right in the backyard, right up my back steps. So
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's somehow connected. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll be popping manholes and determining what we can find from that and putting that in the report too. Yep.
John, will there be any special consideration for the systems that support multiple homes?
Just documenting them and the condition that we find that, I did look and see some design information for some of those systems, so we'll look at that and verify what we can find from the design information. But, typically they'd be designed for two residences and they'd be shared systems.
Hi, I've been in the park for 18 years, and I have a question about the septic also, since I'm concerned about it. I'd like to know if is it working? I'd like to know if any of the residents that have been here for years like I have, has Mr. Scarponi ever used due diligence in inspecting a certain amount of these systems every year, which, as far as I'm concerned, if you're the owner of a park and maintaining it for your clients, then part of that responsibility is doing yearly inspections on selected septic systems and connections to the mobile homes. I personally have not heard of any inspections being done in the 18 years that I've been here. Yes, if you have a problem, then he comes and takes care of it. But to me, common sense says the best way to avoid these kind of problems is to take 8 or 10 homes a summer and inspect those systems and stop them before they start. So does anybody know if he's ever done, has anybody seen him doing any of this kind of stuff? You have. And you can do those without, you've seen him actually digging up the connections between the trailers and the vaults?
Well, I've seen them overtake the...
Because I think a lot of the problems with septic are going to be the connections between the mobile homes and the vaults.
Well,
too,
that may...
I think.
That may be, the other thing is that they've
I know almost every year, they come around and lift up the cement and do a measurement before, and then they have the trucks come around.
Okay. Okay, I guess that answers my question. But I was told also by the horse's mouth that they're having a lot of problems with the septic the last few years at least. Thank you.
John, I have one other question.
I also have a question.
The vacant lots, we have 13 vacant lots, and I'm just curious if those have good documentation, and is that perhaps the reason why they're vacant, is that the septic isn't operational?
So for future development for those lots?
Correct.
For leach fields? Yeah, I mean, that would be a good place where we could do some hand augering, look at what soils are, but it would be a hand auger, you know.
Did everyone hear his answer?
Can you say it more slowly?
Okay, well, we could look at that, the soil conditions at the vacant lots for leach fields, do hand augers to look at the soils.
So you said soil conditions, correct?
Right, yep, for leach fields.
I just have a question. I've been hearing that there are very good records about the septic system. Have those been helpful to you? And my second question is, what would be a bad result? When you're going in, are you taking samples, and what are you expecting to find? Have you done other mobile home parks, and what would be something bad for this park?
Well, I think it would just be, well, the records have been, we just received all the records this week, so I've taken a quick look through it, but I haven't done any real analysis or anything to it, but it looks like they're quite complete as far as the maintenance of that. But would look at just the tanks themselves, the conditions of the tanks, you know, if they're in good shape, or if there's any visible indications of the leach fields failing. That's pretty much what we'd be looking at.
But you wouldn't know if each individual
Yes.
field, like if there's sand going in or there are leaks.
Each individual will take a look at the tanks and you know, take a visual look and evaluate it that way and put it in the report. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just for context, so I don't know, I just want to repeat, they'll look at each individual system, correct?
Excuse me?
Each individual septic system?
Yes.
So
Yep.
each individual septic system, we already have a map from the seller of which homes are on shared systems. And I think that, if the board's okay, is public information. So we can put that on the website. That's not a private, you know, sensitive matter. So we'll put on the website so you can see what homes have a shared system. And I think to Celeste asked a good question, what would be a really bad thing to discover here? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Too close?
So the further you hold it away, the more it can pick up the echo.
Oh, okay.
So if you're picking up echo, it'll cut you off. So you're going to probably want to be close.
So this is better. Okay. So what would be not good?
Just be less loud.
Be less loud? I can't be less loud. So we had like an example client that was a big property like yours. Everyone was on shared systems. It was from the same period of development, the 50s. And they discovered that half of their systems were in hydraulic failure. John, as an engineer, can tell you better than me what that meant. So they had to basically figure out a financial plan for how they were going to upgrade half of the systems that were in failure. And that impacted their decision on purchase. It impacted what they were borrowing. They had to come up with a 10-year capital improvement plan. So that's what the outcome would be here. You'd get this report. You'd say, this is the problem we have to solve as soon as we purchase, if we're going to purchase. This is the reserve that we need to build every month, every year. So we know if our systems are this old, we're going to pump this frequent, and we're going to do reserves that we're building to replace this many systems, year after year after year. Does that make sense? And John, do you have anything to add to that before I pass it to this gentleman here?
No, I think that makes sense.
I know, it's like you gotta hold it kind of in, like at your chin.
Yes, can you hear me? For the committee that is looking into the sewer and water system, you know how Scarponi Drive goes down and around and meets the other portion of the park? There's a dip there, and for years, it's been a sewer. That's what he was supposed to do, take the sand and fill it, but he hasn't. So that's 54 years of stink in there. So run an auger there. You will see it. Soft ground, water comes out.
Do I? You're talking about sand that's washed in there?
No.
I couldn't quite hear.
I'm talking about the dip in Scarponi's Drive, behind, towards Linnell Circle, the dip.
Okay.
Okay? When you go play ball down there, you better have rubber boots.
Are you drain into that? That it doesn't? Okay. Certainly, when we're on the site, we'll be able to take a closer look at all of that.
Yeah, because if you happen to notice, for the past couple of days, he's been moving the dirt behind the facility of his garage, because that dirt was supposed to fill the hole.
Well. Okay.
I know everyone heard you.
No, they didn't.
I'm gonna come to her first just because she hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll go right to you.
I'm reading about the office place building, that we don't need to purchase it, which would be great. But I thought Kurt could tell about the water systems in there, something he uses in that house, is what I'm being told.
Can I grab the mic real quick? Yeah. I'm going to answer this. I just think I might know a little bit more than John on this particular. So, can everyone hear me? Yes. So the item was about one office place. So that is included with the sale. So that's you're going to get, you know. It's not really a question of whether you get it, because when you, we're just going to wait till this. The maintenance director is on the case immediately. I love that.
I needed an answer now, so we didn't get lost.
Yep. So the question about one office place, that will come with the sale. You will get that because that's what the third party was purchasing. What you want to do with that is your choice. If you want to sell that because you're like, we don't need this, you'll take a vote on that, basically. Tomorrow, a realtor is going to come and look inside that building and get you what's called a broker's price opinion. So he could say, I think it's worth $250,000. And we could factor that in to a portion of the mortgage costs, and you can take a vote, yeah, that makes sense to us. Why would we hold on to it if we could pay off $250? But that's a decision that we'll figure out.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. I gotta give you this funny thing.
No, that's a great idea, but there's something down in that basement, that the water meters, that he knows when there's a problem with leaking, he'll get right on it and try to fix it. And there's something he uses there. That's why I'm saying, if we sell it, how do we know that there's going to be a problem, or can it get fixed?
So that's not uncommon, having meters in the basement. How about over here? So what you're describing is not uncommon with meters being in the basement of a stick-built office. So if you did decide to sell that property, we would have to get your attorney to work out an easement so you would have access to the basement. So that's not uncommon. We've done transactions where they've sold a stick-built and they've gotten an easement. But if none of that makes sense, if we discover that that's not the right path, we'll just have to talk about it. Maybe that dramatically decreases the value because those home buyers would know I'm gonna have a property manager having to access my basement. That's all stuff that once we get into that building, we'll figure out, basically. And John will be taking a look at that as well. That was a lot of, anything you want to add to that?
I just want to ask a question around that. John, is that something that can be relocated?
Well, that's where the main water meter is for the whole side, this whole side of the road. So you'd have to figure out a different place. You could put a meter in a pit, but you'd have to relocate that as part of the project if that were the case, depending on if that was part of the sale. But
So you could also move the meter.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more quick question regarding the septic systems. There is an old $64,000 question, does the size matter? I would assume in septic systems that's utterly true. We know of several examples where a couple with a kid was not allowed to move in because the septic systems were only designed for 2 people. And since occupancy rate is going to determine the income, I think we have to take that in consideration as well too, that are we losing business, which therefore means the rest of us are going to pay more rent.
Yeah, I think if we actually wait until the survey's done and we know what the actual capacity of the systems are, I wouldn't put it past Scarponi to have used that as an excuse to keep people with kids from moving in and things like that. So what they've said might not always be what was actually happening. Just so we can keep that in mind, but let's look at what the actual engineering survey says about the capacity of the systems and not go by word of mouth and ancient history.
And based on, we're just doing the visual survey and accumulating all the information that we do have. So we're not going to be able to determine, unless it's documented somewhere, what the design is of these systems. But I did see that there are some design documents in the documentation that was provided, so we'll summarize that, everything that we do know. But, so just wanted to make that clear.
I had a question as to whether Scarponi would be responsible for anything they find that's malfunctioning or...
Sir, we can't.
It's coming, I can hear this. Okay, I'm wondering if Scarponi would be responsible for repairs of anything before we sell or buy.
So, did everyone hear the question? Yes. So, it's kind of an open question. It's an as-is, where-is sale. So, technically, no. He could just turn around and say, well, my other guys are going to buy it. That being said, if we find something, then you'll have the actual documentation, and we can certainly start negotiation, right? And go to him and say, we've discovered there's this much work, this much of these systems are in failure. We want to negotiate with you. Whether he comes to the table or not, we kind of have to see when we get there. So whoever said, like, the flow is kind of John producing this report, it will be made available, and then we'll start talking, okay, what's your leverage? What do you want to do with this information? But he's not required to fix anything under the law, under the fact it's a commercial real estate transaction. Yeah.
But it seems he would be required to turn over any money in the reserve fund that's been saved for those repairs and improvements, correct? The reserve fund?
We don't know anything about what he has in any cash that he's been personally saving is.
Well, that wouldn't necessarily, that would be a business thing, not a personal fund, right? Or would that be considered personal if the park has a reserve fund? It wouldn't be if we own it, wouldn't be personal.
It wouldn't be if you own it. If you purchase it, you're building reserves as part of your business.
But he owns it, so that would be considered personal?
Yeah, because he's been collecting your rent and just putting it into his bank account.
Doesn't seem right, but.
He's been running a private business, so
Yes.
yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
If he's collecting rent from you, he should invest it into the systems, but there's nothing, same as purchasing a different business that requires him to turn over whatever he's profited or.
Well, not profit, but money set aside. Is there no money? We
Yeah.
don't know that there's money set aside.
Does anyone
for
have read?
repairs.
You don't need to hear my voice.
I think I can address that by, there was documentation somewhere, and I'm trying to recall where, but it was said that he didn't have a capital fund. I'm off. There we go.
Can't hear you.
Meaning, I don't know why it's not. Here we go. I'll try that. Meaning that anything that wasn't working, that needed to be repaired, was repaired automatically as an expense item. That he didn't have a fund set aside for capital improvements. So I think that answers the question. Supposedly things were fixed as they were needed to be fixed. And I just want to what was said previously. I did hear directly from, I don't like to use this word, but from the horse's mouth, that if there was a failed system, that he would repair it. Now, you know, I guess it depends on what John and his team find. Maybe if it was one or two systems that were failed, maybe he'd fix them. Beyond that, I don't know.
Any thoughts on any of this?
I have a question. So early in this process, somebody reached out and got a very rough estimate to get onto town sewer. Through this process, would we have a more accurate estimate on what it would cost to get onto that system?
That estimate is something that's on file with the sewer department, Brunswick Sewer, and I was the one that mentioned that way back in one of our first meetings. Kit Scarponi had approached them, and they gave him an estimate, and that's when I mentioned that the price tag of that was, I believe, $4.3 million. But
do we know did they do an inspection during that time, or is that just a ballpark?
No, that was just a ballpark for what it would cost for infrastructure and then to tie in each mobile home to the system. That was in 2022.
If it's proven that it's more cost-effective to go with the town, how would that be paid? And would they take care of everything in the park? We would just owe the 4.5 million, right? And probably how much it costs per month to use the system?
That's a big price tag. If we had to convert to the town sewer, we would have to have funding for that. And I know that there are some parks, right, Nora, that have received funding from state and federal loans. So that's a possibility. It's something that,
Right.
depending on what we find and what we put together for the future, we may have to pursue that.
Right, like especially if in the long run, it's more cost-effective to just get rid of the problem.
It may be, and it may become an issue of, quality of the soil and the how do I want to say this, that we take good care of our land, that we're good stewards for the land.
I've seen, not in mobile home parks, but when sewers go through, sometimes it is passed on to each individual owner of the line that's going to go into their property, and the sewer company will produce mortgages, so you have installment payments of the cost of the sewer line going into your own individual residence. I don't know that that would happen in a mobile home, but I could also see a potential issue where a company might say, we don't even want to deal with the water and sewer, you just pay your own now. So it could come back to be more of a hurt than a help. Just something to think about.
And if I'm understanding correctly, Bay Bridge Estates is doing a comparable connection to town service. So there is precedent in town for them running a water line for Bay Bridge, correct?
I'm not understanding.
Isn't Bay Bridge connecting to municipal water right now? I mean, it's slightly different. It's not sewer, but it's the same scale of project.
I'm not sure what they're doing.
Yeah. So we could look into that. In a mobile home park, to Celeste's point, we wouldn't do an assessment for each individual home. When I've seen it in other instances, if it's coming down the main street, the town will basically assess each property, like the entire Lynn Haven community, not like you as an individual homeowner, and then you would be responsible for doing the pipes back into your property. So it's a Herculean dollar amount. We would need to make a plan and show the impact over time on your rents to justify this way, Route A versus Route B. But certainly with the information that John will produce with his team, like, we're gonna need to figure out if you wanna, if it looks like you're just throwing money in a sieve to keep on these septics, we have to have a plan B, basically. Does that kind of square with what you've seen in other properties?
Yes, and at this point, we're just looking at what you have on site for systems, and then oftentimes we'll do, if the results of this warrant it, it would be called a preliminary engineering report, looking at if you did want to put a septic system in, a collection system, and how that would work with the town. I'm not sure, I'm kind of curious about what the plan was before, whether the town would take over, an easement on all the collection system in the park, or the park would be privately owned and maintained and just connect into the town system, and then you'd be paying for the construction, and depending on there could be lift stations, and the preliminary engineering report would do a preliminary design and look at whether you need lift stations installed, and kind of giving you an idea of what that would cost.
We can get you a copy of that, John.
But at this point, we're just looking at the on-site, the on-site septic systems. But that would be a next step down the road to figure out what a design would be. So probably that number was just like a kind of a pulled out of the air number that you were provided with before.
I think one idea that when I talked to the woman at the sewer department, she said, you could do this project in phases. So you could do the infrastructure first, and then you could add in each mobile home, over time. And I forget, the price tag was somewhere around $2,000 per home. So she said you could do the infrastructure, so run all the piping in one stage, and then you could add on the houses as you went. And maybe what we find is that there's one certain area of the park that's in worse shape than another. One's older, or one has more underground water coming in and ruining the leach field, that sort of thing. And maybe we do it piece by piece in phases. So I think there's a lot to look at, and if we ended up having to do that, then yes, we would start talking to our friends at CDI about their connections with getting loans and grants and that sort of thing.
Any other thoughts on this item? John, any closing thoughts? If you have not done a survey, I'm thinking the people in this room are probably the most likely to have done surveys, but if you know that your neighbor hasn't and they have a problem, Chris is the guy with the bin outside his house at 98 Scarponi. And then John and his team will be on site, not next week, but the week after.
Right.
Yep. No, keep asking questions. That's the point of this.
My question was, after reading the survey, was the curiosity of what was the purpose of that survey. I noticed that I can understand about how many people live in a mobile home and if you're the owner, but the question was what your income is, and then it was interesting, there was also one about your ethnicity. And the income, would that have to do with getting the loan, or is that what that's for? Okay.
So 2 different surveys. John, his survey, he doesn't care about your income or anything. So you're referring to the income survey. The income survey is relevant to financing sources. So we have found that information can get you a combination of grants and lower interest loans, which is why we collect it. So it's in a community's favor to at least share the information anonymously, and the ethnicity stuff, the banks care less about. It's really income, but they give us a form basically, and they use it to access like different pots of money basically. It's not mandatory, but it helps with trying to get the cost of the money as low as we can get it. Yeah. And if people have questions or concerns, definitely direct them towards CDI. I don't want the board in a position where they're intermediaries. We want to make sure that the income side is very as streamlined and as anonymous as possible. Some folks were handing me the surveys, and I appreciate that you did them, but I'm just going to tell you to stick it in the mail, because I don't even see them. They all get scanned by the office manager and spit out with all the aggregate data. So does that answer the question? Other things for John, I don't want to keep you here too late on a Thursday night. Other things on engineering, infrastructure?
Is it just going to be infrastructure access, or do you need to access anyone's homes?
No, not inside anybody's homes, just outside. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But if you see someone looking at your septic in a Du Bois t-shirt, don't yell at him.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it sounds like he wants you to come ask questions or share, yeah.
And don't flush, right?
Well, I leave that to John.
No.
Maybe he wants, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we're ready, if there's no further discussion, for John and Du Bois around our upcoming inspection. We're ready to move on with our next item.
I got one thing to say. Jan, I got a question for you. A couple things have been said, from starting with the first meeting we ever had about sewer system, and then a price was thrown out there, but no real additional information. And I'm glad you brought up a couple of things, like hooking it up to a trailer. I've really been associated with sewer systems where they automatically hooked up to you unless you were a big business, and that was the whole point. The sewer was coming to you. What I'm familiar with is they run the sewer by your house, and then you pay to hook it up, your house to the pipe. And that can be $2,000 anyways, and could be more each. And then you got to repave the road. If you're going to trench all these streets out to put a pipe in, you're going to have to repave. Now we're talking about a big chunk of money. So I'd like to see, when we're going to discuss this further, maybe a little memo with line items. This is how much it costs to do this. This is how much, this is a package deal. This is not a package deal, et cetera. You know, the best numbers we can get, but broken down in a way that is easily understandable, not confusing people. And right now, I'm still confused.
Have you seen a copy of that estimate? Because if you haven't, I'm happy to get a copy of it to you.
Thank you.
And maybe to John as well.
Yes, I already
Yeah,
said
that'd be
I would.
helpful.
Yes.
Yep.
I promised to do that for both of you.
Anyone? Okay, thank you for joining, John.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very
You're welcome
much.
to stay around, but I don't want to make you feel like you got to stay for the whole rest of it.
Yeah, we look forward to you getting on board, and it sounds like you've got a tight schedule to work with, so. Thank you, John.
Some clapping.
All right, so for the sake of time, let's jump into an open discussion on the membership buy-in or share price. We started talking a little bit about it last week, or 2 weeks ago, sorry. So we currently have asked folks to come up with $1 and to submit that with their membership fee, with their membership form. So we've talked about what's a good number, and some of that came out in, it was your paperwork, right? The bylaws and so forth that talked about what's a reasonable price, or, what do we ask folks to invest? So just a couple of round numbers. If we charged folks $50 to, become part of this organization, that would bring us $7,500 if everybody paid. If not, we're not using that as income per se, but it shows a level of interest and commitment to being part of this. So I'd just like to open that up if anybody has any questions or thoughts.
What is it that actually gets done with this money once everybody's paid in and all the members have paid their buy-in cost? Does that money sit in a trust fund and wait until do people get it back when they leave?
Yeah, nothing happens with the money.
Okay, so it's a token dollar amount essentially that just says that you have bought in to the membership of this. And there's no... What about if a resident were to unfortunately pass away while they're here? Who would that...
It would go to when the estate is processed, probated, or if you can't track someone down, some communities will just credit it to the next home buyer. It really, the share is just purely, it's a legal requirement that you have to purchase a share in the co-op, and you have to keep it essentially earmarked or escrowed so that when someone moves out or passes away, you can make sure to do good faith effort to get it back to either them or the person who's inheriting the home.
Okay.
So I see no value add in having it be more than $1. So my opinion is it should just be $1. Oh, you can't hear me. Sorry. So we have it at $1 right now. It could be 100 at the end, but I say we just keep it at $1 because there's no additional benefit to anyone for having it more than 1.
And do you want to go to the last next?
Yeah. If it was going to be in an account that we earn dividends to benefit our cooperative, I would say increase it, but like Zach said, if it's not giving any additional benefit to us in any way, shape, or form, then $1 seems to meet the legal requirement and not need it to be any higher.
I would just like to get an opinion on, as you've been talking about, we need to show a lender that we're all in, that we have some skin in the game, as they say. Would $1 do it? Or as we get closer to financing, would it be better to have more of a share amount?
Did everyone hear what Celeste just brought up? So some lenders are going to require that you pay at least $50 or $100. So it really depends on who you end up borrowing with. I would say, regardless of how it shakes out, I would recommend not collecting more money outside of $1 until you see the outcome of the vote, which I think I heard some people say, you know, you want to make the voting as easy as possible, but then once we know who's the lenders at the table and what their requirements are, then we can kind of determine, is maybe one way to think of it.
So should we just table this then until we get to our closing?
I would say so.
Okay. Because it doesn't
But
make
if you
sense.
feel strongly now about making a decision, go for it. That, I guess.
Well, I guess my opinion is that if $100 is a lot of money to some folks, do we want to do the 50? And then let's wait and see what the lender says. Maybe we don't have to do more than $1.
Yeah.
And to Melissa's point, if the lender said, hey, we want folks to put in $100, that gives us $15,000 if we have 150 people on board as members. And that can earn us, nowadays, that's the interest rates are up a bit, so that can earn us a little bit of money.
Is that a reality? Are we able to treat it like an endowment and just let it accumulate interest that we can use?
Couldn't understand that, Chris.
The answer is yes. Can you park it in a bank and just let it earn interest? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then there could theoretically be a financial reason for us to have a higher
Yes.
one. Okay.
That could be of benefit.
I just wanted to say, along the membership agreements, a resident came up earlier before we started our meeting and suggested that when we if this sale goes through, for future votes, we should have an actual voting card that someone can't just come in here with their own piece of cardstock that they bought at wherever to vote when they didn't buy in. And I think that might be a good idea to think about. Maybe not today,
That's a
but
great idea.
future.
Yeah.
We could just number them somehow, right? We
Yes.
could put it into our database and give it a number.
Yes.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, I don't see a big chance of that happening. Just somebody generating a false saying. I don't think it's bad to have a system for it, but what might be more appropriate is to have a punishment if somebody is participating outside of, their agreed lease or however. Okay, so say somebody does fake it, comes in, votes when they haven't joined. What's the punishment? If there's no punishment, it's not a real rule.
I think it's more of just to track, because we had a little bit of confusion at the beginning, verifying people, more cards were given to each household, and I don't think it'll be that much of a hassle to provide each member with a card.
And this is especially important when we come to our final vote, right, as to whether we move forward. That would be incredibly important to make sure that folks that are voting are eligible to vote.
Yeah, I would say that the final vote is going to be extremely controlled as a process. I'm doing it with a different group now that we were talking through the logistics last night, and there's going to be written ballots. It's going to be a very controlled, anonymous, double-blind vote that will be handled very separately than if you purchase and you're voting on a bylaws change. Unless you want to handle every vote with a very high threshold, it's kind of dealer's choice at that point. But for your purchase vote, it has to be extremely controlled, so we don't have, willy-nilly. It has to be a legitimate vote, basically.
That's a relief.
Janet, I'm going to give it to some people with hands up. Is that okay? The little furry thing.
Yeah. Sorry to talk so much. A couple of questions, and this something I thought about. As a member, we are owners, right? And as owners, do we have any financial liability? None whatsoever. So if the septic systems all break and flood the blueberry field and it's ruined and it's $100,000, individual members don't have to worry about that liability. And one more.
So this is a good question. So individually, no. Your business would carry all types of insurance, the same way I imagine Kurt carries insurance. And if like acts of God or major unexpected capital needs come up, you'll have to develop a financial plan to tackle them. But individuals don't have more liability than you currently do.
And, excuse me, one more question. This came from a neighbor last night, and I didn't have an answer. Her question was, as members and owners, are we, one, and please don't get insulted, getting the best deal from you all compared to another source? And the other question, as members and the owners of the property, should we be protected by getting our own legal opinion on this process?
I'm not really understanding the question here. From CDI? So if you're asking the question, sir, about how we made the decision to work with CDI, that's your question?
Yeah, the question is, are we sure that we're getting the best deal possible? Now, again, they are a nonprofit, 501k. Do we have any way to review, and the question was their expenses, since that impacts us? That was one of the questions. And the other one we answered was the legal side, which has been.
So we vetted, myself and Bonnie, we had references from other clients that have dealt with CDI, and they had every good thing to say about how it wasn't just about the help with the governance, help with this process they're going through right now, but also to help with things going down the road, their networking ability, the people that they know that can help us get things like funding for a sewer system. We didn't just sign on the dotted line. We did our homework. We did our due diligence on behalf of the organization.
I would add to that certainly if the co-op ever wants to meet, it's like kind of awkward for me to be present for that conversation. So if you want to meet just without CDI present, that's always an option. As a nonprofit, I think it's 1090, right? You can check it out online, like what the income is for, what the expenses are for staff.
I did that.
You did that, but anyone can individually. And if you wanted to contact references personally, I can make sure that you get that information. So I guess my answer would be twofold. Definitely feel free as a co-op to have this conversation without CDI present at any point. And if you have questions, please let us know. It's a very niche thing, so there's not a lot of people who are doing cooperative manufactured housing, but certainly you should research us, right? And I know the board did, and we can make the contract available. In terms of individuals seeking legal advice, my answer is always it's a personal choice. It makes sense if you feel like that's what you want to do. That's kind of a personal call. I don't think it's appropriate necessarily for me to tell you one way or the other, I don't know if the board feels differently, anything in addition, or anyone else has any thoughts on this. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to a democratic vote, and everything that's been kind of accumulated along the way has to be transparent about where your money would be going, what's your interest rate, what's your financing. So no one can make a decision without all that fully disclosed.
Can I just jump in for 1 second and say, quite some time ago, the agreement that you had us sign was made public here at one of our meetings. So if folks had questions, we did review it, maybe we reviewed it quickly, but we also came back and, as you know, asked questions around it. So I urge you to trust in your board. You elected us, and that we made good decisions on your behalf. That I have a friend who is an accountant, and she said, here, check this website. This can tell you everything you need to know about them as a 501c3. So that was part of it, and then it was calling the references and asking them very direct questions. And we made up our own list of questions about what we wanted to know.
If this deal goes through and the closing is in September, when is the first payment due? October?
I guess our lender will tell us that.
No, it would, when the first rent payment?
October, okay.
We'll kind of have to figure it out. So if you take a vote, because the law, you have to give 30-day written notice. So if you take a vote, we would just need to make sure that we give you 30-day written notice. So if the timing works out and the new rent starts October or November 1st, we just need to make sure to follow the law. So it'll be one of those two. I've had some groups where they didn't make a decision and they were too close to the first, so they gave another 30 days. So we'll just figure it out at that point, what's legal, what makes sense, basically.
I was just wondering when we're going to find out what the park is worth, side of what he's asking. That's a biggie.
Do you mind if do you want to answer that, Janet?
So we have an appraiser coming in tomorrow morning. They were supposed to come today, but his flight was canceled. So they are going to come up with, by our deadline per the purchase and sales agreement, they're going to come up with a number by next Thursday, July 18th. And so keep your fingers crossed that we get that number that we're looking for. And then there will be more work around that, but they will come up with that number that we're looking for by next week in time for the deadline.
Did everyone catch that? Yeah, so if you see Kurt, Janet, myself walking around tomorrow with a man, that's Adam from Collier's. So he's been doing desk work for the last 2 weeks about, looking at sale comps, looking at rental comps in the area, and then he'll do his site visit, and then he'll do a regional analysis. So he's going to do some traveling this weekend around the area to other communities. And then, as Janet said, next week you will have his opinion of a market value. So this could all blow up next week, or, I think that the board will have to consider, we have to be a little bit sensitive about the appraised value, because if there is going to be negotiating, we don't want it to be showing your hand, right? So we'll just have to think that through the board. I just had a group, it appraised over, it was a little bit different, but it appraised over what they're getting it for. We still wanted the seller to do septic work, so we had to kind of be sensitive about not saying, oh, you're leaving money on the table. So that would be the only instance where I would feel that way, but we don't know if that would be the case here in the first place. A lot of hands. This is a good one.
Oh, sorry.
She wants mine.
Yeah, I'll try. I couldn't understand a lot of kind of what was going on, but were you talking about confidentiality? Once you get the appraisal amount, we don't want that all over the place. So that's a confidential figure for a while, correct? And my second question is, in the contract, did Kurt have an appraisal? I mean, he couldn't have just pulled that figure out of the air. How did he just pulled it out of the air? Okay.
So when park owners, and then I'm going to come here and then over to you, sir. So in these transactions, home buying, those numbers, they put together like a listing packet with profit and losses, and these companies will do valuations based on that data, but they won't do independent third-party appraisals. So most likely, I would say certainly, he didn't have a third-party appraiser get a value and then put it out to market. He probably was like, there's a lot of ego in it. He said, I want this. And as you saw, the price came down marginally, nothing by leaps and bounds, when other companies looked at his books and said, this is what I think I can get for income here. Does that answer?
I'm just wondering, how are we doing on time for this whole process? Not tonight, but just the whole process.
Does anyone want to answer that?
I can answer that. So we have a date of next Thursday to have the appraisal. And then we have another 45 days, is that correct, Nora? 45 days to get our inspections done. And then we have to have a vote and decide if we're going to move forward with this, and then we are due to close mid-September. So we're pretty much on target. And behind the scenes, your board is doing work on finding out what it's going to cost us for plowing and all those expense items that have been done by the Scarponis or by Lynn Haven to this point. So we've got a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but those are the basic deadlines.
I know, I don't like using them either. I know.
Just a quick question on is there not a current and latest assessment on file office, the assessor's office now, and is that public domain, correct?
That is.
When was the last assessment done for this park that we're thinking about purchasing? Is that file at the assessors, and is it public domain?
Yes, that would be public knowledge, and they are reassessing. But that number really, at this point, has nothing to do with what his price tag is. We're only talking $5 million in valuation on the property.
Well, in my book, the problems the park seems to be having, that assessment should be going down, not up. Thank you.
I think this is a good point. We see that assessed values and appraised values vary dramatically in the last 5 to 7 years as companies like Sun and Legacy and Hometown America and Boa Vita come in and just shoot up prices. So I think we'll just see what the appraisal says, because they're going to really look at it as a business, producing rental income, which is a little bit different than how a town looks at it. But towns are catching on and saying, oh, there's more tax base, that we could get here. So we're seeing many reassessments. And I know that's something that the board has been thinking a lot about, that your representative has been thinking about, that the town's been in contact around too. Others, did I miss someone with this? Did you want it to?
No, I'm glad we have you on the board, Celeste.
I just have to say, I've probably done hundreds of titles in the last few years, and the state of real estate is not like it used to be. You used to have an assessed value, and the selling price might be a little bit higher. What I'm seeing in contracts now is it can be 3 times what a town has as an assessed value. I'm working on contracts that have parts written in that if the appraisal comes back lower, the buyer is throwing in $40,000, $50,000 just to get the property. So I just want to make you feel good about, it just seems very warped that the assessment is, $1 million and somebody's asking $10 million for a price. But this is the way things are going. The inventory on property has really skewed things. And these developers come in from out of state with all sorts of cash money, and they see profit all over the place, and it's going to be at our expense. So I think in terms of what the asking price is, we should wait for the appraisal. If it's like really horribly off, then we can, visit it and see what's what. But I think for now, just be assured that the real estate market is kind of wonky now. So As a board member, I came on because I've only lived here a month, but I do see prices, I see contracts, and I really want to use my knowledge to look out for all of you. I really wouldn't want a deal that's going to hurt people, because it's going to hurt me too. So please, all of us here are looking out for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste.
You hold on to it. I got like a million of them.
So for the sake of time, we've pushed off one item, 2 meetings now. So we're going to jump right into the property management company information. And some folks have a handout, 2-page handout. Good questions to ask when interviewing property management companies. So I'm going to pass this over to Nora.
So I'm going to cover these, and then they'll be posted on the website so that if you didn't get print copies, you'll be able to get digital. So this is all, the conversation about value and about the final vote is sort of like, that's the big elephant in the room, understandably. There's a lot of little steps that we got to take through this whole process so that if you do decide to purchase, you don't have to scramble in 30 days to figure out how the heck you're going to manage the place. So I know it might feel like, why do I care about this? I just want to know if we're going to buy it. But if you do buy it, we need to set you up to operate, you know? So something that comes up that we've talked about, I'll just say it again quick. These resident-owned communities that we work with are not self-managed. We don't find that self-managed communities are pleasant places to live, generally. If you know someone who lives in a self-managed community and they love it, they exist out there, by and large, you moved into a community and you didn't want to collect rent on your neighbors. So we got to set you up so that's not the situation. So the first thing I'm going to look at says just scope of work. So I'm just going to run through the scope of work. This will not take more than 5 minutes, which I know I'm always saying, and then I take 25 minutes, but this time I'm serious. You're going to start interviewing property management companies who are going to come in just as John did and introduce themselves and be interviewed by you. If you know a company that you would like to be considered, this is the time to bring it to the board. We have recommendations from the 10 other communities in your area. We'll provide, honestly, just direct references so the board can reach out. How do you like so-and-so? And you can get it from direct. And groups, this is kind of the whole suite of what a property manager in a resident-owned community does. There's a side of it that's maintenance and operations, and there's a side that's financial management. I'm going to start with the financial management. Rent collection, the biggest one. They'll provide a lockbox often. They'll provide a place where you can mail checks. They'll often provide an online platform so you can pay electronically if that's what you want. They will handle your collections. So they'll stay on top of collections, and if it needs to go to an attorney, they're kind of on the ball there. It's not Janet's responsibility or Zach's responsibility as treasurer. Zach's got a life, Janet's got a life. That's not their responsibility. So they'll handle, collections, kicking it to the attorney where necessary. They will produce every month a financial packet. It's a thick financial packet. You don't need to get it every month, but the board will discuss it openly every month. So you see the status of your business, what you're taking in, what your bills are. It's a level of transparency that's very different from a privately owned community. They will help you build a budget every year, CDI, that's part of what we do with groups. So you have an annual budget, so we make sure you follow an annual budget. They will coordinate your taxes and your audit. You'll get an independent audit done every year. Again, we don't want people to feel like this is a willy-nilly thing. It has to have a lot of checks and balances, so you make sure that the business is sound and that you trust that your money's going to a cooperative that's functioning legally, functioning financially sound, everything. And they'll do tenant screening. This came up probably at one of the first meetings. You will develop criteria for your credit worthiness and your criminal background criteria. That's something that I will work with you with after you take a purchase vote. If you don't end up buying, let's not spend the time on it, but if you do decide to buy, we'll spend a meeting like this working on those documents. I'll do a fair housing training. We'll talk through the criteria. It obviously has to be legal, it has to follow the law, but there are things that you can say we're looking for applicants. And then you will hand that criteria to a property management company, and they will run your checks, your query checks, and they will report back to the board, so-and-so meets the criteria. And the board will take a vote to approve their application. It's a very controlled process that we do a lot of training on because it's fair housing. We have to be really sensitive about it. And obviously the board is not running query checks, so that's something property management does. In terms of property management, they're gonna come to your meetings and they'll report, oh, this month we processed this many resident reach outs, complaints, needs. They're gonna monitor a 24/7 emergency line if a crisis happens in the middle of the night. They are gonna do vendor management. So some groups, some communities I work with like to be very hands-on. The person in Chris's role wants to do all the vendor management. They want to be up in the tree, cutting the limbs. They want to be driving the plow truck, everything. Other communities, particularly my 55 and over clients, they're like, I don't want to do that. They pass it all on to the property management. It's really your discretion, how you want to structure it. You're thinking that you want to be up in the trees, or?
No, I said I want to be sleeping in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
answering
so
calls. Again,
it's a shift, as I understand it, as you've described it. The Scarponis have handled all of this in-house. That works, for some communities. In a resident-owned community, we want it to be a company. We want it to have staff. We want you to interview a number of options, so you can reach the best decision. So that's that handout. The other one I'm not going to read through, but these are just good questions to ask a property management company when they come interview. And Celeste did put together some questions and some research as well, but I won't read through those. A lot of them are pretty stuff you'd ask anyway. Any questions for me, and then I just pass it back to the board? Any thoughts on this search?
I just want to ask, how soon do we need to get rolling on this?
Immediately.
Yesterday.
Okay. 2 weeks ago when it was first on, actually 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And this is the vendor that I'll help the most with, because finding a property management company that you like is very important and difficult, to be honest.
Okay. All right, we're going to be talking a little bit about vendor selection after our meeting anyway.
I just wondered if you have mobile home parks that are using property management people in Maine, so you might have some vendors you already know.
Yes.
Okay.
Our clients in Maine have had a really hard time finding property management companies in Maine. A lot of them use a company in Rhode Island. I don't actually know why. Pat, because she works directly with them, will be able to come and tell us about that. No connection
'Cause
to
we
me
like
in Rhode
you.
Island. They're in Woonsocket. I'm in Providence. We don't overlap.
Any other questions? It looks like we're losing folks.
Yeah.
They're getting the glazed over look here. We should pass out caffeine partway through the night. Any other questions on that? Yes, Linda. Here, wait. No, wait. I want everyone to be able to hear you.
I just wanted to make sure that when talking to the property management company, we are also asking what their fidelity insurance coverage is, and see that on the list.
Yes, definitely. They need to have, that is a question that they're going to need to be able to answer. They're going to have to list you on their policy. You have to make sure they're insured. It's a great question to ask.
Anybody else? Okay, I think it's almost 7:30. We'll jump ahead. I just wanted to share with you, and some of you may have already seen this, Tom, who's not here tonight, our vice president, he and I interviewed with Maine Public Radio a couple of weeks ago before the holiday, and it aired, was it just last night? It seems like it was 2 nights ago, just last night. And, we were concerned about what message we're sending. But it wasn't just Lynn Haven that was involved. It was, you know, folks from other communities, some who weren't successful that are going to be bought out or have been bought out by these out-of-state companies. So it's an honor for us to be where we are, that we are the first community since the new law was passed that has moved forward, and at this point we're very hopeful that we'll make this happen. So if anybody's interested, I guess Nori, maybe you could send out the group email. There's a link to, there was a radio recording, and then there's also a written article as well. But, you know, be proud of what we've done up until now. And we're as I've said before, we're very grateful to the Scarponis for getting us started. That was our first obstacle, and now let's be putting some really good vibe into the appraisal, that number comes through and keeps us moving forward. So that, I lost it for a second. Okay. So I have one.
Your body block.
What?
It can't go through your body. You gotta give it some line of sight.
You gotta look at it, I think.
If you stand between the device, it's gonna stop the signal. So
Oh,
stand side.
so like over here? Over there?
Anywhere between this
Ah, okay, sorry. So there's one other item. If anybody has any questions about the radio program, we can get that information to you. I just wanted to share it because we were really excited. We thought that the woman that wrote the article, she did a nice job. There were a couple of just very minor inaccuracies, but she got her point across. The next item that I want to bring up, first of all, there's been some discussion already about the appraiser visit. That is now happening tomorrow morning. So next week we'll have something to report to you on that. And I think from what Nora said, we've got to be careful on how much we say about that until we know what that number is. So one other item I wanted to bring forward, we've had Carol O'Donnell. She was here at our last in-person meeting beside the wall over there, and she talked about some other options that we have for helping folks out. So she put me in touch with a woman that works for Habitat for Humanity, and they have a program called Critical Home Repair. So many of you folks may have heard of Habitat because they help people build homes, right? And you have to get involved and swing a hammer and all of that. So this isn't like that. You don't have to get involved. I spoke this morning with a woman who's a representative. Her name is Debbie Atwood. She is the Donor and Volunteer Engagement Specialist in Bath. And I had to look at that because I would never remember her title. So she helped me, she shared the details with me about it, and I'd like to share them with you. I also have a dozen handouts that we'll have available here if you'd like to take one, and I'll make sure each board member gets one so that they know what's happening. So how it works it's in partnership with the town of Brunswick's Affordable Housing Support Fund. They've established a 2-year pilot program with $50,000 each year for 2 years for a total of $100,000. So what they do is they will help to repair, weatherize, and modify existing homes. And that's where I felt they could be helpful in our community. So when I was out canvassing the neighborhood, I can't tell you how many steps that I walked up and decks that I walked across that seemed and felt unsafe to me. I did speak to Mr. Scarponi. He said that was part of their inspection, but I just feel very strongly that this program is something that we could help folks take advantage of and get your steps safe. So there is, of course, you have to qualify. It's income eligible. And these numbers look pretty reasonable. And you also, I'm sorry, have to own the home or live in the home owned by someone in your family. So there's an annual income up to 80% of the area median income for for the county. So for context, it says the income limit for one adult in Brunswick is $57,200, and the limit for a family of 4 is $81,700. So I think it makes a lot of sense. If you or your neighbor needs that kind of work done, please reach out, and Debbie has offered to come and speak with you as well. But I will make sure I'll leave them on the table here, and on your way out the door, please feel free to grab one. Or if you have a neighbor who is in unsafe steps, please grab one for them. And I will be happy to get more for you if you'd like. And I think that's it. We have an open forum now. If anybody has any questions that have not been addressed, or any questions about what I just said, feel free, raise your hand, and we'll get you a mic.
Excuse me. Sorry I have diarrhea in the mouth tonight. One thing that's come up that I have a concern about, and I guess many of you, it looks like we live in Dodge City right now. People are leaving very heavily. I read the real estate reports about every day, and we're seeing a pretty heavy exodus of people leaving. Next door neighbor left primarily. She was concerned about a comment that was made that the rent could, this was very early in the process, increase by $200 a month, which basically is a 40% increase. She moved across the street, borrowed money, $5 grand or so, to move the mobile home, because she had a concern that she could not afford that kind of an increase. So my point is, we should be very careful in what we are going to say what the rent could be until we really know what it is, because it's a very heavy exodus right now. And a lot of them are selling very quickly, which is good, but that's a concern that a lot of our people have right now.
Does someone want to repeat what this gentleman said for someone who didn't hear? Do you want me to do it? You want me to do it? He was just saying there have been people leaving the community. One person moved across the street because of concern about what the rent could be at the end of this process. Go for it, Bonnie.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test, test, test. Good. First, I apologize to the board for standing back here. My hearing aids kept interfering for some reason over here. The other thing I just want to bring up is to tell you people that this board is not a bunch of fly-by-nights. We are very blessed to have a very professional, hardworking board. I just jump in and help when I can. And so anyway, I just want to thank you for that, and for CDI, and to tell the people, like Allstate says, you're in good hands.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
So that person who moved away moved to what, Brunswick Bay? Is that what it's called? That is that location across the street, that other part.
It's Brunswick Bay, yeah.
You work with them, right? So they're rent controlled, right?
They're resident owned, so they control their own rent because they're resident owned. Yeah.
Right. So if they pulled that off a few years ago and people are moving from here to go there for better rates, that's what's going to be happening in 5 years when people from the rest of the community and town at large are moving here, because this is the only place that's going to have any sort of control over its rents.
The point, yeah, that group purchased over a decade ago. So they've been resident owned for over 10 years. So they've controlled their rent. So now their rent, I believe it's in the 300s, because they have not seen the increases for profit. So it's a tough time that you're purchasing. You've known that from the get-go. That group had the benefit of their owner deciding to sell 10 years ago and approaching the residents directly rather than putting it out on the market. I think I saw a hand. I'll come right to you and then to you.
I was just going to say that our rent will be based upon our share of whatever the mortgage is. And if you're looking at 26 million and then the added cost for management, that is our concern. Even if you amortize the loan over 30 years, it's going to be a considerable amount per lot. And that means we do not have control. We will not have control until we own it free and clear, which would be 30 years.
Yeah, we have discussed this in previous meetings, which seems like a good time to bring up the fact, if anybody wants to watch our old meetings, our new YouTube channel for Blueberry Field Cooperative is up and running, and we've got all the old meetings on there if you need to review those. Yeah, the rent increase is going to be felt, no matter what the final number is. But you also need to realize that the median house price in Brunswick right now is $600,000. Median house price. So. Median.
Median.
What's the mortgage on that?
I don't even want to.
We can't afford it.
Yeah.
Probably $2,500 a month.
Do you have any ballpark figures? Like just an estimate maybe?
Of what the rent will be?
Yeah.
I think we've disclosed that before. We've talked about a number somewhere around between 700 and 750, I think is what we were looking at originally. And we won't know those exact numbers until we get all of the pre-development costs, which are now estimates, until we get actual numbers for that. Until we're ready for the closing. And we haven't submitted any of that publicly because we don't want to cause any confusion. We don't even know the answer to that yet. So there's no point in us submitting something that's guesswork right now. And we've reviewed all those numbers and we've looked at how can we make things as good as we possibly can and keep those numbers as low as we can. And please trust us that we live here too. We want our rent to be low too. Right. And we just don't want to be paying our rent to someone from out of state that doesn't care about us. And I don't believe, and maybe some folks do believe, that somebody would come in from out of state and that they wouldn't charge us as much as we're going to charge, but they're going to have the same price tag that we have.
Are you
Whoever buys this place is paying that $26 million.
Have you found any banks with lower interest rates?
I think this is a good item that was discussed the meeting 2 weeks ago. The goal is to access funds through Freddie Mac that will pass through probably M&T, though you'll have to make sure that that's the best deal. And they've indicated that the income survey data can be used to try and get as low a rate as possible. So what they're quoting is lower than any other lender I've heard right now, but let's see it in paper, let's see it at the end of this process. But absolutely, the goal is to get this as much grant and as much low-cost interest as is possible. But yeah, that has been taking a lot of involvement from the board and then working with the lenders with the same goal that you're hitting on, exactly, yeah. And the taxes is a big concern, yeah. That's a big, and Sally Costello, who's the Director of Economic Development, has been in contact, a lot of conversation. We had a conversation where I was just like, the taxes can't go up for this to work, so we just need to find a way for them to not go up. That's our starting position, basically. Do you want to speak into the mic?
Our taxes have been very, very low, and for years now we haven't had to pay anything because my mobile home is older, so 1996. So this will be like going from nothing till who knows what, but, right, right, right. Exactly, but if it's estimated at 27 million, the park, that's a co-op, right, that's true, everybody pays a certain amount.
The issue, I'm shouting right in your ear. The issue around reassessment is that whether or not you purchase it, you're going to end up paying for it. So in other instances, I've worked with resident groups where the residents didn't purchase, it didn't make sense. But as Celeste said, is it helpful if I come talk over here? But a different company purchased, and because the company paid so much more than the assessed value, the assessment went way up, so the company turned around and just billed it to the residents, basically. So that's what's difficult when you let these big out-of-state companies set these prices, and then the town reassesses to get closer to that price. Whether or not you're resident-owned, residents end up paying more in what we've seen. I can't speak every time. Did you have something?
And the other part of that is that if these out-of-state companies end up buying, if we can't make this happen and they buy, do you think for 1 second they're going to go to bat for you like we will? We're going to go to the town and see what we can do about this. They're not going to do that for us.
And if the vacancy rate fluctuates, will that have a direct, will that affect the taxes?
What's the first
The
part of that?
vacancy rate, if you lose like a lot of empty lots, will that affect the taxes? No. It won't, it always stays the same no matter what?
That just affects our revenue.
Right, so you can't negotiate with the town? Like go to the town and say, look, we have all these empty lots?
I don't know the answer to that.
I would say that there are currently conversations going on with the town, basically around, hopefully, knock on wood, a negotiated tax rate. But in terms of whether fluctuating vacancy rates impact assessment, because reassessments are done so infrequently, the answer would be it wouldn't, it wouldn't impact it. Unless the vacancy level has changed so dramatically from one assessment to the next, and then it would at the time of the reassessment. I know we've kept people here for almost 2 hours, so I don't know if we want to wrap.
So it's 7:45. Do we have any last questions? Yes.
I'm sorry.
No. They're all good questions.
Let's talk about politics. We should form a PAC. All right, we should form a political PAC. We got how many votes do we have in here? 300, 400, 500 votes. Work on the city. There's a big battle going on right now. Brunswick, Bowdoin owns $865 million worth of property. They pay taxes on $65 million. And I think if we have a PAC, we can negotiate. Votes are important to city council, and I think that's something that we need to get started very quickly. Again, hey, we don't want to pay any more. What can you do to help our taxes? See what happens. All right, thanks.
And maybe if we have to pay more in taxes, maybe they should plow our roads.
I do have a question about how the evaluation is assessed. I don't know if this is something any of you can actually answer. When somebody says, this house is worth $3 million, business says it's worth $3 million if somebody will pay $3 million. What standards are our governments using to assess? Do they just take whatever the last sold value was and say that's what it's worth now?
So they're currently in the process of trying to figure out how they're going to assess you, is what I would say. So Sally is currently negotiating or having conversations at the town level, basically to figure out what is the most, what's the best way to assess this property. So it hasn't been determined yet, I guess is what I would say.
Okay, so I guess one thing I've thought of that bothers me in, the town and the country is when you see large pieces of property that have been owned by a big business for a long time and they want to sell it for way more than it's worth. and then it just sits there and it becomes blighted. I think of Pleasant Street, you know, right across from Amato's, McDonald's, that car dealership has been languishing for years because nobody wants to buy what they want to sell it for. Why aren't we getting the taxes out of like that rank speculation? Is that a thing
This is
we
like
could
above my.
do people follow what I'm saying?
I follow the question, but I don't know if you want me to weigh in on it.
We may
Are
want to
these
have the
arguments-
tax assessor come in and answer us.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if we want to argue why we should pay less, maybe we give them solutions to find it elsewhere.
I think it's important for us to attend the town meetings when they're going to discuss taxes and bring our questions there.
Could
They're the
not
best
agree
ones
more,
to
to your
answer that
point.
for us.
Oh, we both were eager and talking at the same time. Do you want to adjourn?
I think so. I think we're about ready to adjourn. Are there any last-minute questions?
Oh, you're making a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I have to make the motion. All in favor? We have adjourned. Could board members please stay behind for just a few minutes? We have a couple of quick things to discuss.
And
Thanks
we're not sure
to
if we're
everyone
gonna
for
be-
coming. We appreciate it, your support.
Me and Janet, we just